Welcome, everybody, to our 92nd version, it's hard to believe, of Master Coach's Weekly Buzz. I'm surrounded by incredibly talented people. Mick Haley, who is our ex-Olympic coach and fellow Hall of Famer. Bob Bertucci, who has coached in very successful Division I schools in women and in men. And we are also lucky to have Dr. John Foreman, who's also a coach, but he's our technical advisor. So this week we have a very important show to me, and we'll explain as we go along why this is so important. But before we start, as we do every week, we'll give you a quick update on men's and women's beach volleyball, men's indoor, women's beach volleyball. The March Madness that we're going through now will become the May Madness. The first week in May is going to be the championships for both the men, NCAA championships for the men volleyball and the women's beach. And we will tell you as weeks go on, starting next week, and how the tournament is starting to shape up in terms of who looks like they're going to get the automatic bids and who's going to be those at-large bids that everybody's going to be fighting for. So we'll give you an update on that. Men's volleyball this week was really an unusual week because of spring break. We had UCLA #1, Hawaii #4, and Santa Barbara #6, and we're all idle. They did not play. #2, Penn State picked up 2 wins to go 17-3. Long Beach had 1 win to go 14-3. USC had 1 win, which is now 16-3, and they are #5. So it wasn't, but none of the big teams, top teams played each other this week. Our outside team, maybe Ball State, and we're still looking at them as a possibility. They had 2 significant wins this week and holding in at #8. But on the opposite side with beach volleyball, it was really different. UCLA, who was not supposed to be #1 this year, is now 15-0. Last week, they won 5 matches in Hawaii in 3 days. They went 6 time zones to Gulf Shores, Alabama, which is the host of the NCAA championship this year. They went there in 6 time zones and they won 6 matches. They are now 15-0. And they beat #11, #4, #13, #20, and #5 in that order in 3 days. #2, USC went 2-0. The only big win they had was against #19. TCU is very interesting. They didn't have any big wins, but they are undefeated, them and UCLA, and they're 19-0 for the year. FSU was 3-1 with the loss to UCLA. LSU is 16-2 with the loss to UCLA in the same tournament. So very interesting. That's coming in May. They expanded the tournament to 16 teams who are going to be the automatic and who are going to be the at-large, and we'll give you our thoughts about that next week. Now I'm going to turn it over to Mick Haley. This is a close topic to all of us, but especially Mick, and please introduce our guest.
Well, this is pretty exciting. We have 3 graduates from Ball State University and all great players on today to talk about the celebration of life that took place last weekend in Muncie, Indiana. Our first guest that I'll just introduce is Tom Pingel, and Tom has an amazing past. I wish I could talk a long time about all 3 of these guys, but I'll give you the quick rendition here. Tom graduated from Ball State, started or at least was involved in the development of the Circle City volleyball program in Indianapolis. Is one of the best guys in training left side attackers that I've ever seen. And as he transitioned out of juniors, he went to USA Volleyball to become the director of events and high performance. And I thought his tenure there really brought junior volleyball out into its place with the way the tournaments were organized, the tryouts for the USA teams and those kinds of things. I think that's been missing ever since Tom left USA Volleyball. So and I don't understand this. Tom's a Wisconsin guy, and we're talking about Indiana here. So we'll have to see how that worked out. We'll ask him about that. And he's a Packers fan. That really hurts also. But other than that, I really think that it'll be nice to hear from Tom Pingel. Tom, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Mick.
Our second guest is Wes Lyon. Now you look at Wes, and I was at a party that he threw at the celebration for all the guys, and he was a middle blocker in college, player of the year, and he looked like he'd be better as a pizza maker. He was putting out pizzas like you've never seen at this party. But Wes has some tremendous history in this sport. A graduate of Ball State. Dad was a faculty member at Ball State. He and the Shondells hung out all the time. Steve Shondell and he played together. Wes went into teaching, coaching high school girls volleyball, won 2 championships at Muncie Central. But the biggest thing is he put together a junior program that's second to none in America. The Munciana Junior Program, of which he is the owner and co-director, has by far taken kids from Muncie, Indiana, and the Indiana area and put them on the map, not only with the way they play the game, the championships they've won, and the number of kids that has transitioned from that program to collegiate volleyball. I think it's been one of the best development programs we've ever seen, and certainly a tribute to Dr. Don in the way that he's really represented Muncie. Wes, congratulations and welcome to the program.
Thanks, Mick. You're a great PR guy.
And our third guest doesn't have to be much said about Dave Shondell, the son of Dr. Don. Dave also a big player on the Ball State program, graduate of Ball State, went into coaching, high school coaching, won 4 championships at Muncie Central High School. What is it with Muncie Central? Wes was there, you're there, your basketball coach was at Muncie Central when you were there, Dave. Muncie Central putting out some pretty good people, it looks like, but a nice lineage of championship people coming out of there. Dave has taken, well, Dave captured John Shondell, his other brother, and he had to do this because Steve Shondell, his second brother, had won 21 state championships at Burris High School. Think about that, guys, 21 state championships. Dave couldn't stay in high school coaching. He had to do something better. So if he couldn't outdo that, he got the Purdue job, and then he grabbed his brother John, and they went down there and they took kind of a subpar program at the time and built it into a giant in the Big Ten, and is still competing to win a national championship. So it's been pretty special to see all of this. But Dave, welcome to the show. And let me start by just asking you about the celebration. It had to be really special. You spent a lot of time on it. Your brother Steve spent a lot of time on it, the whole family. Give us your thoughts about the celebration.
Well, thanks, Mick, and everybody for the opportunity to talk about my father, Dr. Don Shondell, and his history. But the itinerary didn't go according to form at the banquet. I can say that. But at the end of the day, it turned out to be better than what we could have ever imagined. We had nearly 150 alumni come back. Just imagine that. And Dad hasn't coached for a long time. Dad hasn't coached at Ball State for 25 years. And yet over 150 of his former players show up to honor him with thousands of people from the community. And not to mention Doug Beal taking the time to come in and speak on behalf of him. But my brother Steve did some of the organizational work. And he felt like we could find a way to get 45 speakers up and in 2 hours time. And I kept telling him that's not going to happen. And I was right. But we ended up using every single minute we had between 2 o'clock when the program started and 7 o'clock when Ball State played Ohio State. We had speakers talking about Dr. Don. I think the best move was after the first group of speakers spoke, we were already 2 hours and 10 minutes into the show, into the celebration. And luckily Beth Getz came up with the idea, let's move it on up to the reception area, which is where Don's training center is. Okay, the Dr. Don Shondell Training Center is. So we moved it up there, which was already set up for a reception, which meant cold beer. Okay, so cold beer was in the mix once we made that move, and that took some of the edge off of things. And then all the alumni got a chance to speak, and it was great. And not only was it an opportunity to honor Dr. Don, but I thought equally important, or partially important, was to catapult this Ball State volleyball program and find ways to do things that had not been done before. And that usually means financially. But in this case, it meant financially and also bringing all the brothers together. And I'm not talking about me, Steve and John. I'm talking about all the brothers of Ball State volleyball. And everybody was in hog heaven. It was one of the greatest events I've ever been part of. And it was so much fun from the time we got to Wes's house and he started rolling out pizza dough to the time we left Roots Burger Bar downtown Ball State's campus at about 1:30 in the morning on Sunday.
There's no question that's pretty special. I want to come back at the end, Dave, if we have time, and I want you to tell us, I want you to think a little bit about this. I want you to tell us about how it was growing up in Muncie, in your household, with all these special people around. Bob Bertucci, you want to go after Wes here a little bit?
Let me go after Wes a little bit, since we did play against each other for a couple of years, just a few years back, when I was at Springfield and he was at Ball State. Hey Wes, I remember, way back when, Scott Mose, who taught me how to play volleyball, all right, was real good friends with Coach Shondell. All right. And, pretty much, learned a bunch from Coach and would always constantly, bring it back to our group on the East Coast. I was maybe 15 years old and playing with one of the top, city basketball teams at the time. And basically, Scotty came in and took that whole basketball team and started teaching them volleyball. Let's talk a little bit about Coach Shondell and how you got started in the game and what it was like to grow up in Munciana, with your dad at Ball State and how you got exposed to Coach Shondell.
Well, Bob, I'll share the first story is that as an eighth grader, now bear with me, an eighth grader, right? Me and 3 other future recruits to Ball State won the intramural 4-man tournament at Ball State. And, that included, 50 plus teams of all college students. And we were called the Duncan's Dinkers, and Don was our coach, but he justified it after we won it and caught a lot of grief because all 4 of our dads were professors. So that made it legal that we could compete. So that was maybe a small start to it. But, Dr. Don was always, since I was 5 years old, was in my life in some way. So it's just been interesting. He was always a teacher. You talk about stuff you learned about the sport of volleyball. Even when I was lucky enough to make my first trip out with some national team stuff, he goes, "Hey, would you write down all the drills?" And that's probably when I started to become a coach, because I outlined all the drills and the whys and so forth. And we spent a few hours going over it when I got back, but just always learning and always looking for the next way to get better.
So, I mean, the whole purpose of our show today is really to honor Coach Shondell. All right. And I guess the reason I asked that question was, here he is, a college coach, a college professor, but he has the time to take 8th graders and teach them volleyball and get them exposed to the game. I know the first time I got exposed to Coach Shondell, I went to a volleyball camp, a YMCA volleyball camp up in Greenkill, New York, near Port Jervis, and Coach was there with Jerry McManama, all right, and they were the head coaches at the camp. Physical education guys, just teaching and exposing everybody to the game. And I mean that's some of the things that Coach did over and above just coaching a college team, promoting volleyball and really getting a lot, kids involved in it and exposing them to this great game. And he's been involved with you with starting the Munciana program, hasn't he?
Well, Steve actually started the program with one team, but Don was always in the background of everything we did, and really still is. He was around, but that progression was, not to get much into that, but Steve started it. Two guys in this picture, Tom and I kind of took it over about 1980 for about 5 years. Tom then took his skill set to Indianapolis to start Circle City. Dave jumped in. So it's just been a continuous cycle, but always, Don in the front row cheering us on.
Now, I think it's just important really to acknowledge the fact. I mean, here, I never played for Coach Shondell, but 2 years ago, I'm still going up and calling him coach. All right, because he had an impact on so many people. All right. I just wish I had the opportunity to work with him at some point. I'd be a whole lot better coach right now.
Well, there's no doubt one thing we all learned from him is his ability to create his plan, his practice plan. It was always down to the minute. The notes he would take, even when he was 85 years old, he's sitting in the front row of an ABCA convention, taking notes, and that's just who he was. He always had a way to, try and get that next advantage, because, the other side of Dr. Don is he was one competitive person. And so he would teach and coach, make you better. But as soon as you started playing against him, there was no rules. It was just whoever's going to win.
Well, that's great. Hey, Wes, it sounds like you had a little bit of a party going on at your house, during this celebration. Why don't you tell us a little bit about that? It sounds like the old college days of Wes Lyon.
Well, the numbers might have been kind of college worthy. We had probably 60 to 80 people in our house, and but just great, because it was just all these guys back back to see celebrate Dr. Don's life. So we cooked a few pizzas. That's happened over the years. No records were broken. I was ready to cook 24, didn't quite get there, but we've had parties that cooked 64 of them. That is the record, just to put it on out there for everybody.
Oh,
But,
okay. So this is not so bad. Your wife might forgive you sometime in this century then.
Sometime, that is true, because I was a little bit tired when we got done that night, so I forgot to clean up, and I woke up the next morning, and by golly, it was clean. So I do, my hat's off to her for at least stepping up to the plate on that. But the thing is, it was like old times, just being able to talk to people you hadn't seen in years, or people you see all the time. But it was a special weekend. And
Wes, do you have anything else that you'd like to say? How Coach Shondell impacted your life?
Well, it's interesting. Dr. Don retired, and the next year he's coaching our TNT team in training with Munciana, and he treated it just the same as he was coaching his college team. He'd have that legal pad with him. He would have a whole practice plan made out for every practice. And he'd forget it about once a week, and I'd have to go drop it off at his house. And that went on for years. That was always a good time. But the thing about him, he was so teacher oriented. And I'll just share one story about that. The first year he did it, he wrote a letter to all the parents in this TNT program. It was about 40 kids, as to why we don't we don't compete. We're not playing in tournaments. We're not going to play in tournaments because, and he spent 2 pages explaining why he felt like that was not what's important when you're 6, 7 years old. It's about learning the skills of the game. And that's what he held to. And he was such a teacher in that way. One of the things a lot of our coaches have taken away with young kids, you don't toss one ball and let them fail. He always gave every kid 3 chances when they're working, short tosses at the net, because he was going to make sure every kid left that practice feeling good about themselves.
That's great, Wes. Thanks. Brian, why don't you grill Tom a little bit here? We want to hear what he has to say.
Grill is a good word. I like that word. I just want to know that you took the party to this center where there was cold beer and it loosened up the party. The men's volleyball players I know and speeches I've made with the free beer, it certainly loosened up the party. So the speeches were still good. They were coherent afterward, I hope. Anyway, Tom, if the audience doesn't know, Tom Pingel has been involved in every aspect of this game. He's coach, player, administrator, referee, you name the position, and Tom has been involved. So I wanted the audience to know that. Tom, let's talk about what happened at the end of this. There was a fundraising component to this celebration, and how did that go?
Yeah, it was, the component went well, and it was simply an opportunity to get a number of alumni back in under unfortunate circumstances, but nevertheless, people coming from not only from around the country, but around the globe to come in and celebrate the life of Don Shondell. And as Dave said, the initial part was in the arena on the floor where the match was going to take place that night, and then it moved into the Don Shondell practice facility. So it was a great opportunity to kind of show what some fundraising efforts that had taken place a few years ago could do, but also strike while that iron is relatively hot and get people reinvested into the program, because a lot of people hadn't seen the men play. Fortunately, they played pretty well on Saturday night. But I think where they're ranked, people are getting excited about the program, and getting them kind of back into the fold, and sharing the stories that everyone did. I talked very briefly with the AD Beth Getz, and she goes, "So how are things going?" I said, "It's great. What we're saying here at the ceremony is one thing, but the best stories, as you can imagine, were at Wes's house and at the post-match get together on Saturday night." But it was good, and I can't even begin to tell you how many people I hadn't seen in decades that came back, and it was great to reunite with them and swap stories, but also kind of get them going, hey, we need to support the direction of this program. And so I think there was some real positive traction that came out of that.
Because of Mick's involvement, and we've followed the team this season, and you still are our dark horse for this championship. So we're following, and you won this weekend, so it was good. Tell us any personal recollections that you may want to share, Tom.
Well, Mick kind of mentioned it. I grew up in Wisconsin at the time, we not only had high school volleyball, but we had junior high volleyball in our school system. So that started pretty young. It was 9 versus 9, but nevertheless, we're getting out onto the court, a bunch of boys playing, and then that went into high school. And in Wisconsin, their season is in the fall. So a lot of guys started playing volleyball to kind of keep in shape for basketball. And it didn't take long for me, going to one camp and through my first high school season to have basically that reverse, that I became a volleyball player who played basketball to stay involved. And at that time, there were only just a handful of varsity programs. So I took it upon myself to get the word out that I was interested in playing. And Coach was very communicative. These are the days way before emails and websites and things like that. And he was handwriting notes that a lot of us are very familiar with, and sending photocopies of newspaper articles and things like that every week were coming in. And we had a really good visit. And my days at Ball State, I had a fair amount of success. The team had a fair amount of success. But it really kind of paved the way for me to get into coaching. And as I mentioned this past weekend, there's a number of people and three of which are on this call with Mick, Wes, and Dave, and also Steve and Doug West, and of course Jerry McManama, that had a huge influence on me. And they're all really high branches on the Don Shondell coaches tree. And there's many others that can certainly that are certainly part of that, including Craig Skinner and Kelly Sheffield and Arnie Ball, and on and on and on. But that laid the groundwork for me to continue doing what I was doing. So my time at Ball State is very memorable, and the friendships that I gained are certainly for a lifetime.
Yeah, I think, and we'll talk about this in our buzz reaction, but the coaching tree that's so publicized in other sports, and this is a great coaching tree. And I'm glad that you mentioned it. Now, when the son is one of the top coaches in the country, you got a pretty good situation going there. So
I'll tell you, Brian, excuse me real quick. One thing
Sure.
that a lot of people don't realize, and I had intended to kind of talk about this during my time this past weekend, but we ran out of time. But a lot of people know about what Coach brought to the school and Muncie community and Delaware County, but a lot of people don't realize. I mean, Dave, you probably know how many Hall of Fames has he been voted to, including the FIVB Hall of Fame and USA Volleyball. And he was the past president of USA Volleyball, and he was the Friar Award, which is the highest award given for lifetime achievement in the sport of volleyball by USA Volleyball. And he's got all of those. And there's just not a lot of people that know that his reach was way beyond the Muncie, Indiana area.
Well, one of the weaknesses we have in our sport is to get this information out. And it's great to hear from you, and great to learn more about or remember his life. And I think really appreciate the information, and keep the name alive, right? Keep that name alive.
Absolutely.
And Mick, let's turn it over to you.
Okay, I'd like to go back to Dave to finish this off, but can you give us a little bit of an idea of what it was like to grow up with a dad who is out there just not only changing so many lives, but giving so many people opportunity, and yet probably you have to fight for time also. How did that work?
Well, in retrospect, now you look back and you see what he did accomplish, and the many people that he did have an impact on. But growing up, he was just your dad. You didn't think anything different. And as Wes knows, my dad coached the elementary baseball team, which was, and he took everything serious. Okay. So he put a tremendous amount of time into it, and being a professor of physical education, he taught us everything. I mean, we were playing tennis, we were swimming, we were playing baseball. Everything you did, we did. Okay. It wasn't all about volleyball. It wasn't like he was force feeding volleyball on anybody. Okay. Sometimes he did it and I didn't even like it. Okay. At times, but I was more of a basketball, baseball guy. Okay. But I ended up obviously going into volleyball. But we didn't think he was anything different than anybody else's dad at the time. Though his job was Ball State volleyball. And what we probably didn't know was that he had this incredible vision for what the sport of volleyball could be. And I think that's the most impressive thing to me as I look at it. And probably the one thing I feel like I got the most from him out of my two parents was this ability to see something that could happen and then be so focused and so committed to see it through and make it come to fruition. But he was always involved. I mean, whether it was baseball, football, basketball, volleyball, no matter what it was, and again, he was just a regular dad. So I don't think there was anything unique about that. He just had a lot of energy and a lot of time, and he cared about others.
Yeah, one of the stories, all of you, some of you may remember, but guys that weren't there this weekend, they talked about Dr. Don running up the hill with his lawnmower and running down the hill with his lawnmower. So kind of his weekly fitness routine. So you had to be at this, celebration to really appreciate all the stories and all the things that were shared. It's a once in a lifetime deal, and it was the best ever. Anybody else have a closing statement before we
I
sign
just
off?
wanted to say something. The best
Okay.
way to keep the name alive is for you three to keep doing in what you're doing. Your excellence in your areas are to continue that path is heartwarming to me and to master coaches here. And I'm speaking for all of us. Just keep bringing forward the excellence that you already presented, and just keep it alive.
Thank you.
Thanks, Brian.
Okay, I think we're out of time, but guys, thanks so much. This was a nice follow-up to the celebration for me. I could do this for another week. That's how special it was. But thank you three for all being on. Good luck to each of you, and let's keep spreading the word.
Yes, thank you all for coming.
Thanks, guys.
I hope the burgers were good at midnight.
Yeah.
And we hope to see you all again. Thank you.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Guys, thanks a lot.
Bye.
Appreciate it.
All right, we're going to start our buzz reaction, and there was so much that happened there, and it was just all wonderful. And Bob, what did you take from this? And let's start with you, okay?
Well, Brian, I think one of the things Tom hit on it. Coach Shondell. I mean, it's all about honoring Coach Shondell, and the impact he had on volleyball and his community, but the impact he had nationally and internationally, is one of the things I'm glad Tom brought that up. I relate a quick story about, how he impacted my life, when I was a high school player, on one camp opportunity when he came out and was just teaching volleyball, and he spread his knowledge, to a lot of kids in the eastern part of the country, at probably one of the first camps or one of the first camps in volleyball and one of the biggest at the time. And here was Coach Shondell, teaching volleyball. And then of course we crossed paths, hundreds of times after that, with USA Volleyball and coaching, in the different, institutions I coached men's volleyball at and went to play at Ball State, and from a player to a coach. And like I said, I've always referred to him as Coach Shondell. All right. And I think back, and there was a handful of guys that really had that kind of impact, and Coach Hay at Springfield, Scotty Mose I mentioned, O'Neill up at New Paltz, who got the Eastern Volleyball Collegiate League started, I just think it's important for people that are in the game to know these people and the impact they had early on in the game, and that's what should happen as we move through our career. All right, and the younger players and coaches come on the scene.
Mick, what did you were there, but what did you take out of today's interview?
It was so good. It was like being back in school. I mean, that's how good it was. The group of guys at Ball State from 1959 to 1996, all were either recruited or affected somehow by Coach Shondell. And one of the things I did when I spoke is I asked them how many of them had been given a nickname. And about 2/3 of the guys raised their hands, because that's what Shondell did. But we also gave Shondell a nickname. His nickname for us was Shawnee. We referred to him as Shawnee when he wasn't around. Shawnee said this, Shawnee said that, Shawnee did this. Shawnee says we got to go do this, kind of thing. And I don't know if you can get a more special feeling. It's like when you play this game and you're playing as hard as you can with your teammates on the court, and the intensity gets so great that you can look at each other and you don't say a word, but you're absolutely being able to communicate with your eyes. You're just playing that hard. And it's, it's the best high you'll ever get. And it's one that seemingly all of us got at Ball State. All of the people that played for Shondell benefited from this opportunity to be like this. And those 150 guys that came back, 146 of them were from that era that I talked about. And it was an amazing experience to hear and to feel the same thing we felt when we were on the court and we hugged each other, we slapped each other's hand. I can't tell you that you could ask for anything better, at the end of your career, because Coach Shondell would have been smiling at the highest level because all of the stuff we did was still there with all of the guys. It was that much fun.
Well, my takeaway was what I've felt for a long time, and that is that we do a very poor job in our sport publicizing our heritage. And we at Master Coaches at least have an avenue to bring forward to the public some of that which is lacking. And I'm happy to do it and happy to hear about it. And it's something that all athletes can relate to. They had an experience and they shared it. When you're in the foxhole together, the most important things are your brothers or your sisters, and you're there together. And those experiences can be rekindled, and we need to do that more often than we do in our sport. And by the way, the other third of the guys who didn't know they had a nickname had a nickname.
John Foreman has done a couple of things that need to be pushed out for in front of people more. He did a book on basically master coaches. He did a book where he interviewed for 40 to 50 minutes various coaches from the past and almost all of the names. And I've let him down because my job was to try to interview Coach Shondell before he passed away. But with COVID and everything, I couldn't get to it. And we missed that opportunity. But John on his website has one book and he's developing, I think, 2 others.
John, why don't you talk about that?
Yeah, that would be good if you would.
Yeah, you're talking about Volleyball Coaching Wizards.
Yes.
Which started out as basically an idea of getting the stories about not just coaches that everybody knows, but coaches who maybe only have more of a regional reputation, or don't coach at the very top level, but are still extremely significant in the sport. Like coaches who've won 20 state championships as high school coaches that most people in the volleyball community don't know unless you happen to be in that state. And there's a bunch of those people scattered throughout the country. So myself and Mark Lebedew, who some people will know, has coached professionally in Europe for a bunch of years, was the Aussie national team coach, recently took over Slovenia for that national team as well. We interviewed in the initial phase over 40 people. And we've since brought in Lauren Bertolacci, who's also a professional coach in Europe, and now is the women's national team coach for Switzerland. She started interviewing just a group of female coaches with the same sort of concept. And a big part of the idea, and this was really important to Mark, was we need these stories. We need this literature in our sport.
No,
Yeah.
John, that's really nice of you to do. Mick actually interviewed me, and Mick was good. As an interviewer, he was really good. I don't know if I had anything to say in those 40 minutes, but he was good.
I
And by
asked
the
you
way,
some pretty tough questions.
Yeah, the difference between famous coaches and not is simply opportunity. I've always believed that. So those coaches who won 20 state championships could have won at any level in probably any sport. So that was always my feeling. Anyway,
That kind of takes us to last week's show. When we had Russ Rose on, and I kidded him a little bit about when there was going to be the celebration. His athletic director had put in the release that there was going to be a celebration. Well, it's probably no secret that Russ didn't just resign. He wanted to continue to coach the way he coaches and has been successful for 41 years. This particular administration wanted him to change the way he coached, and he refused to do that. And so he just thought, if it's going to be this way, then I'm going to walk. It's interesting that the athletic director now is walking, and this is so apropos. She said in a release that, well, I've done this way for my whole life and I'm not going to change, meaning now they're asking her to change or walk, or maybe she didn't get the option. But it is our coaches out there. There needs to be, when they decide to hang it up, there needs to be a way to celebrate them if their schools aren't going to. Andy Banikowski had a nice celebration. He didn't really want it, but people around him forced UCLA to have a wonderful celebration for him when he retired. But you look around at the coaches that have retired, and I don't see those celebrations. And doing it at the AVCA is one way to do it, but the people in your community that you worked with and were so close to, that's where you really want that kind of a celebration. And you hope your ex-players would be part of that and they would come back. I'm sorry that Dr. Don didn't get to see this himself, because all these players coming back, he would have been overwhelmed with the support and the feeling that they had. I'm sorry Jim Coleman passed away in Minnesota, and he had nobody to celebrate for him except USAB, and they did a lot of name recognition and that sort of thing, but there should have been a celebration. Russ Rose played for Coleman at George Williams. There are so many, Bill Walton, there are so many guys that played at George Williams that I think would love to celebrate Coleman. I had the advantage of playing for Shondell and almost immediately then playing for Coleman. And then after that, having an opportunity to play with McGowan, play under McGowan. And so I got three of the more technical, educated coaches that I could ever wish for to play under. And I learned so much. Coleman was a master, for instance. Shondell would lay it right out for you. He would, like they said, note-taking. Coleman taught you by asking you questions, and you thought you were just having a discussion, and we'd be in a van for 9 hours going to a tournament, and there'd be all these questions. One of Coleman's questions was, he showed a picture of a setter with their hands up, and the ball was just above. And he said, is the ball going in the hands or coming out? Those were the kinds of questions we would get all the time. Very interesting technically, because then you started examining the hands to see if there was a release or if there wasn't, and the position and all of that. And that's one of the ways that I learned so much about the game that I think is so special. Terry Liskevich, for his, I think it's his graduate degrees, PhD at Ohio State, produced a book of pictures with questions. And we printed it at the Kellogg Community College Education Center. We got it for a very good price because they were teaching people how to print. And so we put that book out, and I don't know where it is. It should be in my library here, but I could pull that out for you and show you. So Coach Shondell, I've got lesson plans from him. I've got the lesson plans. He also would write up power volleyball promotions. He promoted by writing about power volleyball. In the Midwest, it was always power volleyball. Wasn't like that on the West Coast. We were a little bit different. so it was, it's kind of interesting. And I have all of that stuff in my scrapbook still and in my folders. So anybody that wants to see a Shondell lesson plan or a promotion or anything like that, I have all of that stuff.
I think what Brian was saying is a big point that we lack in the sport. And that's just the history of the sport sometimes, and letting new people that are in the sport know about, people like Coach Shondell, Jim Coleman, and Carl McGowan, and the impact that these people had on the game. And
And
there's
don't forget Harlan Cohen, since you're a setter.
yeah, there you go.
He's a
Oh,
Chicago
oh,
guy, if you want to know the truth.
well, I just remember him being out the West Coast all the time, but
Yep, he came from Chicago.
yeah, and so just knowing that history, and recognizing these people for what they did, I think it needs to be something that's being done in the volleyball community. It's great if it's being done at the universities, and it's great if it's being done in the communities they live or work. But I think it's also important for us to do it as a volleyball community.
Well, there's no question about that. I mean, I'm convinced that we don't take care of ourselves. We fight so hard to establish our own fiefdoms, so to speak, and sit on our own mountains in our own little cities, that when one of us retires or as we go along, we should be telling people how good they were and how tough they were to compete against. And I'll tell you the day, one of the toughest people I ever had to play against was Linda Dollar at Southwest Missouri State. She would get her kids up to play against my teams like you have never seen. And I couldn't help but tell people how good she was, a master at getting her teams ready to play. Elaine Michaelis was another one that was tough to play against at BYU. Her kids would get up, but I think they got up for us because they knew we were good, and beating us was also good for them. And I think we should be telling people how good all of those people were or are when they decide to retire. The one person doesn't get a lot of credit for winning was Don Shaw. He won how many championships at Stanford? 4. And he always gave you the hang loose deal and let's go to the bar and all of that stuff. Now, to win 4 national championships, the story on the street was, well, he's at Stanford and he gets all the good kids. Well, we've all had all the good kids and we know how that works. That's very difficult. Somehow he was able to manage that and win championships. When you looked at these Ball State guys, Shondell, well, all 3 Shondells, because John coached at Newcastle High School before he became Steve's assistant at Purdue, all 3 Shondells and Wes Lyon, and even Tom Bierman from Fort Wayne have won, I would guess, over 30 state championships in Indiana high school girls volleyball. I mean, who else gets to win if those guys are winning that many? I mean, think about that. And those are all Ball State guys. And I haven't even mentioned the other Ball State guys that are winning. So, and then you got 2 Ball State guys that win national championships in the same year. Skinner Skinner grew up in Muncie, Indiana with Wes and all these guys. He won at Kentucky and then Kelly at Wisconsin in the same year. They're all from the same cut of cloth. Yeah.
Bob, why don't you talk about our partner and the tip of the week?
I think it's time to talk about Weber's weekly recruiting tip. Sue Weber is the event partnership director at NCSA, and also the athletic leadership team member. But she's also a volleyball coach, and she does a lot, for volleyball. That's one of her passions. And she provides us with these weekly tips. The one we got up today is financial fit. And, there's a lot that goes into that. And I think, we've talked last week, we were talking about, boys volleyball a little bit. And we mentioned it again this week with Ball State. But, there's specific expenses that have to get covered when you're looking at going to college, and you got to look at the financial aid part of it, the merit scholarship part, and any other grants the school offers, in addition to athletic scholarships, and even in the women's game, not everybody gets a full scholarship. A lot of Division II, Division III, and a good portion of Division I, are these packages that get put together. You also want to look at, whether they have the ability to go to grad school, and whether there's funds available, the same merit money that might be available in your undergraduate study. And what factors determine the financial aid, the academic, athletic scholarships, looking at all that stuff, and does the school have work study? And I guess the last thing I would mention that Sue has talked about some was everybody should look at filling out a FAFSA form, because you never know how that might help you. And so the tip of the week is really to find that financial fit for each individual kid that's being recruited.
It goes on to say, I think it's really important that all high school players and coaches and parents get involved with NCSA. It will help. I've gone through it, Bob, we've all gone through it. Our kids going to college. There's so many questions, and here somebody can guide and help you with the best fit. I recommend highly that the student athlete get involved in NCSA. Look them up, find out how you fit with them, and how they can help you.
Here's the best part about this whole deal. Once you sign up with NCSA, that's a lifetime membership. You only pay it once, and they take care of you. Say something doesn't work out and you have to go in the portal, they're still going to help you out. They're still there for you. So Brian's right. We should look at that.
All right, are we ready to go into Brian's Bites?
I am ready. And I wanted to say that at the beginning of the show, I said, why is this show important? And it's really important because, like we already mentioned, we need to do a better job of promoting the past, present, and future. Today, we talked about the past, but we need to remember, I watched a couple weeks ago at the NBA All-Star game, and they had the top 75 players of all time. The amount of publicity they got from that was amazing. We won't get it through the normal channels, but maybe, and I've been thinking about this, there are millions of volleyball fans or volleyball involved people in volleyball in this country. How do we, and maybe the answer is, how do we bring them together? And maybe the answer is everyone sharing their contacts through one source. If we could somehow put all of the contacts in one source and get that information out, like the top 75 players of all time, and we take that and send that to the millions of people involved, perhaps we can go through the back door of getting so much, we get so many people involved that we force our way into the front door, into the ESPNs and the CBSs simply by numbers. Numbers are what runs it today. Watching this past week, when in the NCAA basketball game, ESPN, every station covered what happened. A basketball got stuck in the backboard. They couldn't get it down. They had the tall guys jump up and couldn't get it. They had a stick and they tried to poke it out. They couldn't get it poked out. So what happened? A cheerleader put a girl cheerleader on his shoulders. She reached up and took the basketball out of that. This week, she has an NIL deal simply because of the numbers that came from that. By the way, it's kind of a funny thing. We've always said for every famous man, there is a woman behind him. Well, in this case, I guess reverse is fair game, right? But this time,
Brian, that had to be a brick that guy shot.
yeah. It bounced up. Yeah, probably was. But the guy who held up the girl. So now it's the the guy supporting the woman and not the woman supporting the guy. He didn't get an NIL deal. The only NIL deal was the girl going up and taking the ball out of the backboard. But she got so much, and it's all about numbers. Now you can buy a nationwide t-shirt company has her picture on it and all that, but she got a big NIL deal. And I'm saying that it's all about numbers, but the way we're going to get our numbers is simply go through the back door. And somehow we all have to give up our contacts into one central location. That's a belief I have now. Let's toss it around, see what happens. Maybe we can get one block. And if we get a block of the millions of fans from the country, we can maybe open some doors to getting more publicity for our sport. As we know, and all of us pictured here, we came from other sports and we were all taken by the sport of volleyball and we all liked it better than the other ones and we got involved. So that's my idea for today. Don't become a cheerleader. I'm not suggesting that. I'm suggesting either jump higher or let's get together and do that. Now, I want to say before we leave that at Abilene-YSA.org, you can go right to the Master Coaches Clinic, which is June 3rd and 4th. We have a meet and greet on the 3rd, and on the 4th, we have a full day, full clinic. We'd love to meet you. Sign up as soon as you can. We will all be there, including Ruth Nelson, and we will. It will be good. We will meet your needs. And last thing I want to end with, and Bob, I told before the show, and Bob said, "Are we going to say this?" And I said, "Yeah, we are." If you want to be involved with the getting money to Ukraine, there's a very famous beer company called the Russian River Brewing Company, which is a famous independent beer producer, and they have some of the most popular beers in the country right now. They just made 2 beers written in Ukrainian, so it's written in the language on their labels, and all proceeds are going to Ukrainian relief. The name of the 2 beers is Putin is a Dickhead, which I think it might be appropriate. And the other one is a picture of Putin where it says, "Throw him out the window." So those are the 2 beers. If you want to get involved with Ukrainian relief, I think it might be a good thing to do. Anyway, that's our show for this week. We look forward to seeing you in the future. Again, we'll see you at the clinic. Support our sponsors, and we're signing out from here. Thank you, everybody. See you next week.